Globes and Maps Part 2. Okay, so we finished up the first part of the video where I think we ended off on one of the types of maps, and so now let's get moving to part 2 of it. So the next type of special purpose map that we'll take a look at is the climate map. And the only thing that the climate map does, if you guys follow the cursor, it just concentrates. It just talks about different types of climates on the planet, on the map. So, for example, if we're looking at this map of the world and different climates, all right, cursor, come on back. Okay, so look, let's take a look at the bottom. You see the tropical climate, dry, temperate, is blue, polar. The funny thing is, if you take a look at us in the United States, or specifically in Louisiana, we're in the temperate, in the C zone. Now, anyone who's spent, and what temperate means is that it's kind of a moderate temperature. Anyone who has spent a summer in Louisiana, I think the last thing that we would say is that it is a moderate temperature, right? But I guess we are, especially when you consider it, when you compare it to some other places in the world. So what a climate map does, they show the climate zones of an area. This graphic is a climate zone map of Africa. Take a look down at the bottom where you see the cursor. It shows the different types of climates that are on the continent of Africa. You have the tropical wet and dry, the semi-arid, the desert, the subtropical dry summer, the humid subtropical, the humid oceanic, and the highland. Now this is another type of special purpose map, or general purpose maps, is the vegetarian map. And what it does is just shows the different types of plant life, and that one is kind of a self-explanatory. And this is a graphic and up-close map of Canada, reflecting the different types of vegetation that grow in Canada: tundra, boreal forest, grassland. We see the different colors, and then look down at the map, you will see that it is reflected, and it appears that the boreal forest is the largest. That is the largest amount of vegetation region that is in Canada. Number 7 is an oldie but goodie, is one that we are probably most familiar with as far as special purpose maps, and that is the road map. And what the road maps are, these are just maps of roads, or not even just road maps, transportation modes. Transportation mode maps, they show the major highways, roads, airports, railroad tracks, cities, and other points of interest in an area. Now, I remember probably when I was you guys' age, about 15 years ago, right? 10, 15 years ago, when my parents would travel, if we were riding together as a family, we would actually use a map. My mom would have a map open, and my dad would, like while they're driving, they would have this big folding map open, and they would chart where we were going on the map. We don't do that today. When my wife and I go driving somewhere, if we go to somewhere we haven't been, there's no need to take out this big unfolding road map, right? We just use our phones. And the GPS system, either use the GPS system in the car or on your phone. So the road map has a lot of it. It's changed. It's no longer this big folding deal that we used to have. It is now much smaller and much more manageable, and they're in our phones. The cartogram is the next type of special purpose map. I want to pay a little bit of attention to the cartogram, and I'll tell you why. The thing is with the cartogram is that they present information in a different way. Okay, they present statistical data in geographical distribution on the map and the value by the area. Now, what does that mean? This is what it means. Take a look at the bottom of this page, or the second graphic, the one where my cursor is. What this is a cartograph, and what it does, it shows the distribution of wealth throughout the world. Now, the thing about a cartogram, right, it does not show an accurate depiction of landforms on this map. This map is not used to depict landforms. It's not used to show, give directions. It's used to give information. And the information, based on the information, that will determine how the landforms actually look on the map. So it actually trusts you to understand, have a general knowledge of how areas are supposed to look, because based on that, the areas would be deformed from how they're supposed to look. So take, for example, this map is a map of GDP. of per capita, and the only thing GDP is the measure of the wealth of a country. So what this map is basically doing is measuring the wealth of the different countries of the world. So we see where we are in the United States. All right, come on back. The United States is large, it's distorted. We all know the United States is not big and fat and bloated like this. It's not shaped like that. But that is the way that we're depicted on this map. And it's not even that if you take a look at Western Europe. Western Europe is not shaped this way. But Western Europe is much larger than the rest of Europe because that is used to represent where the economy of the world is. That Western Europe has a lot more money than the rest of Europe. Also with Japan and Korea. Take a look down at the bottom, though, to Africa. Africa, the continent of Africa, has a very struggling, underdeveloped economy. It is reflected in this map by Africa being smaller than Western Europe, North America, and Japan, when in real life we know that Africa is actually larger than North America and probably larger than Europe too. But for the purposes of this cartogram, the way they represent the information is by distorting the size of the continents. We also see that Latin America and South America are a lot smaller than the United States, Europe, and Japan, and that is used to reflect the fact that the income of the world is distributed unevenly. This second cartogram is of the United States. It shows the political parties or how each state votes normally politically in the Electoral College, and it is used to reflect the fact that if you take a look at it, California and New York are much larger than states like Montana, North Dakota, or Iowa, and that is used to reflect that these states have many more votes in them, so they normally have more votes for president. You can also tell that the blue states represent the Democrats, the red states represent the Republicans, but we see that a disproportionate amount, this map is actually of the United States, believe it or not, a large amount of votes in the United States are concentrated in California, Illinois, and New York. This is not what the United States looks like, right? But for the purposes of a cartogram, they're able to, this is how the cartographers get their point across that California, Illinois, and New York have a disproportionate or a large amount of votes in the voting for president. And another type of special purpose maps are aerial maps. And these are just maps that are taken from the air. They're oftentimes shots from satellites or from large planes. So aerial maps are photo maps, and they're taken from the air. They're normally used in construction, engineering, surveying, environmental studies, that sort of thing. And there are two types of aerial maps. There are aerial photography maps, aerial photograph maps, and these are taken using airplanes. And there are satellite image maps, and these maps are maps that are taken from satellites that are actually taken from space in satellites. This picture represents a map taken from an airplane. If any of you have ever traveled by airplane before, you know when you look down, if you've ever had an opportunity to look out the window, like before you land, this is what it looks like. This is what everything looks like if you're passing over subdivisions and things. Time zone maps are the next type of special maps that we'll be covering, and we'll get into it a little bit more. So I'll briefly go over time zone maps. It's okay if you do not understand what time zones are. We'll spend a little bit of time on it later. But just know that time zone maps, they show the different time zones in the area. And I will explain a little bit more what time zones are right now. So the Earth, the planet Earth is divided into 24 different time zones. Time zones were first used in 1883 by the railroads to standardize their schedules. Each time zone represents a 15-degree longitude, or the distance that Earth rotates in 1 hour. Time zones sometimes curve or form angles to allow for geographic or political needs. Okay, now, what does all that I just told you mean? What did all that I just read, what did that mean? All right, what it means is this. Remember from the other day, we discussed the equator, we discussed the prime meridian, correct? We also discussed the fact that the prime meridian is the 0 degrees longitude, and it goes through this place, Greenwich, Great Britain. And it is set up that way because Great Britain at that point in time was the center of the earth politically. It was the most dominant country in the earth, on the planet Earth, politically. So, what does that have to do with time zones? Well, this is where time zones start. So the base time zone, the 0 time zone, is called Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Time. It is set at the prime meridian, which is 0 degrees longitude. This map reflects, or this graph reflects, what I mentioned earlier, how time zones are not like the lines of longitude. They're not straight lines, okay? Time zones sometimes wiggle to reflect political boundaries, and this is an example of the time zone wiggling or changing to reflect the political boundary. This is actually the international date line. The thing that you want to remember at the international date line is that because there are 24 different time zones, and each time zone is actually 1 hour, so each time zone represents 1 hour. There are 24 hours in a day. So if you go from one time zone to the other, so if you go all the way around the world in one day, or go all the way around the world and cross all 24 time zones, you will actually gain or lose a day depending on the direction of the earth that you travel. Taking a look at the entire earth can be a little bit disconcerting. It could be a tad bit overwhelming. So let's concentrate on time zones here in the United States and try to figure out how time zones apply to us in the United States. Okay, in the United States, we have 4 time zones. We have the Pacific time zone, the Mountain time zone, the Central time zone, and the Eastern time zone. There's one more, the world. This is where I want to be. So this is the Pacific time zone. This represents California and the West Coast. This means if you ever listen to television times, this time zone is the one that is the furthest behind us. It's the furthest behind us. This is the Western time zone or the Mountain Region time zone in the blue. Normally, if it's 3 o'clock, and what I mean, if it's 3 o'clock in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, if it's 3 o'clock in Baton Rouge, then it is 4 o'clock in the Mountain time zone. Okay, so they are 1 hour behind us, and if it's 3 o'clock in Baton Rouge, then we just skip a time zone. If this is Baton Rouge, Louisiana, it's 3 o'clock here, then it is 4 o'clock here, and it is 5 o'clock here. And the green, this represents the green time zone. This represents the Central time. This is where the great state of Louisiana is, also the great state of Illinois. This is the time zone. This is our time. This is the time that we here in Louisiana, this is what our time runs on, the Central time zone. And then the Eastern time zone. Now, everything in the East, they are 1 hour ahead of us. The West and the Mountain time zone, they are 1 hour behind us. And in the Pacific time zone, where California is, they are 2 hours behind us. So, for example, when you guys listen to your television shows or you listen to a commercial for a television show, you will hear them say oftentimes that this Sports Center comes on ESPN at 10 o'clock Eastern time and 9 o'clock Central time. That means that they actually come on at the same time. But on the East Coast, it is 10 o'clock. And in the Central time zone where we are, it is 9 o'clock. Or you will hear something that says, you'll hear an advertisement that says Sports Center from ESPN comes on at 10 o'clock in the Central time zone and 8 o'clock in the Mountain Pacific time zone. This is the reason for you sports fans why football games and basketball games that are played on the West Coast, you have to stay up really, really late to see USC play, because they are actually 2 hours behind us. So when we're thinking 7 o'clock their time is like 9 o'clock our time. They are 2 hours behind us. So we always have to stay up late to catch their games. The end. Now remember, make sure you answer any questions or anything that are on your notes guide. Please do not answer the questions that are within the black box. We will do those in class. Have a good evening.